We recognize that CVUUS gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people, land that was seized by European colonists. We respect the Abenaki people's spiritual relationship to the land, and we hope to learn from them how we can live together in peace and justice. Good morning, and welcome to CVUUS. The Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society exists to spiritually nourish, challenge, and sustain people of all ages and circumstances so that they might lead lives of integrity and service. My name is Becky Strum. I'm a member of this congregation, and I serve on the worship team. And today I am the worship associate for our settled minister, the Reverend Barnaby Feeder. I don't know about you, I am a morning person, and I wake up at 6:30 no matter what. So today it was great to have the daylight, and in keeping with the theme of our service today, I need to be grateful for that this morning when it starts to get darker at the end of today. You are welcome here no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background. You are welcome to join us in community as we learn, live, and love together. If this is the first time that you're gathering here with us, please do sign our book in the lobby so that we can get to know you better and you can get to know us better. And everyone, please do join us downstairs in the Ann Ross Fellowship Room for our social hour after the service. If anyone needs hearing assistance for amplification, if you're not hearing me, if you check in the back with Richard, there are some excellent hearing devices. Each week, there are many ways to become involved and connect in addition to Sunday services. There's the weekly email blast, the monthly newsletter, and items listed in your order of service today. I'm going to highlight a few of those. First of all, our upcoming Radical Love Party. Look for information on this downstairs so you can sign up and learn how you can participate. Also, next Saturday, November 12th, will be an open mic night. I think there's still an opportunity to sign up to participate. CVUUS's Race in America book group continues with Woke Racism. And there are many others coming up in the weeks to follow. I'm highlighting mostly this week. Thanks to everyone, to Jess Daniel and for seasonal decorations, and all who stepped up to help with music, tech, ushering, greeting,
and safety and social hour. Takes a congregation to make these happen. Please rise as you are able for our gathering song. We have gathered number 360 in the gray hymnal and on the screen. The call to by Max Coots. And thanks to Doug Richards and the small group ministry for suggesting this wonderful piece. Let us give thanks for a bounty of people, for generous friends with hearts and smiles as bright as their blossoms, for feisty friends as tart as apples, for continuous friends who, like scallions and cucumbers, keep reminding us that we've had them, for crotchety friends as sour as rhubarb and as indestructible, for handsome friends who are as gorgeous as eggplants and as elegant as a row of corn, and the others as plain as potatoes and good for you. For funny friends who are silly as Brussels sprouts and as amusing as Jerusalem artichokes, and serious friends as complex as cauliflowers and as intricate as onions. For friends as unpretentious as cabbages, as subtle as summer squash, as persistent as parsley, as delightful as dill, as endless as zucchini, and who, like parsnips, can be counted on to see you through the winter. For old friends nodding like sunflowers in the evening time, and young friends coming on as fast as radishes. for loving friends who wind around us like tendrils and hold us despite our blights, wilts, and witherings. And finally, for those friends now gone, like gardens past that have been harvested, and who fed us in their times that we might have life hereafter. For all these, we give thanks. Our chalice lighting today will sing. It is Rise Up, O Flame, number 362, also in the gray and on the screen. So please join me in singing as we light our chalice.
Good morning. Use the little box. I don't know if everybody's aware of the super official, professional, congregational props we have back here, but I just wanted to show you the thing that we stand on when we need a little more height, because you'll see what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's right. If you become a worship associate, maybe you can stand on it sometime also. Or just ask me and I'll let you. Okay, so I have the pleasure of doing the Time for All Ages, and I am going to do a book called A Bus Called Heaven by Bob Graham. And I just want to make sure the pictures are working before, because if they're not, I might adjust a little bit. And no pressure. There's a lot of tech stuff yeah. All right, cool. Okay, so before we start, two things. This totally ties in with the idea of it takes a village, or it takes a congregation. And you have two parts in it. So I'm going to tell you in advance so you can practice. So you're going to play the neighborhood. And your first line will be, you'll say with kind of anxiety and worry, the words "go where." So you've just been told that something has to go, and you'll say, "Go where?" So let's practice. You ready? Go where? Yeah, good. It could even be a little more, but that was fine for a first time. Okay. The second one is it will say, "and the crowd cheered," and then you will cheer in whatever way you want to. So let's try that. I'll say the line, "and the crowd cheered," and then let's have some boisterous cheering. You ready? Yeah. Very good. Okay, so here we go. Abandoned. The bus appeared one morning from a sea of traffic, right outside Stella's house, where no bus should be. Tired, old, sick. It had a hand-painted sign on it, held down with packing tape. The sign said, "Heaven." The bus brought change to Stella's street. Traffic slowed where no traffic had slowed before. People stopped and talked together, just a little, but they talked. Stella changed too. She took her thumb from her mouth, where it usually lived, and said, "Mommy, that old bus is as sad as a whale on a beach." Then she pushed open the door and climbed on board. Stella, the color of moonlight, stood among the bottles, cans, and trash. She was so pale, you could almost see through her. "It could be ours," she whispered. "Whose?" asked Nikki, Vicky, Alex, Yasmin, and Poe. "What did she say?" asked Mrs. Demetris. "Ours," she said louder. "Well, whoever's it is, it needs to come off the road," said Stella's mom. And when Dad came home that afternoon, he found an old bus where the front yard used to be. "The wheels stick out onto the sidewalk," he said. "There are sure to be regulations." "Well, it's staying here," said Stella. "That's my regulation." Next morning, Stella looked out her front window. People were sitting on the wall where no one had sat before. Under the bus were Esther, Rajit, Chelsea, and Charles. "Mommy," said Stella, "I'm going out." And she joined them. That day, the bus settled in. Weeds nudged up around the tires, snails made silver trails, and a pair of sparrows nested in the old engine. While the children played, the grown-ups mopped and scrubbed and polished. That night, the bus got a bit of new paint. And for the non-readers, it said they're writing "street rats." "Hello, boys," said Mom. "I've got an idea. Come back tomorrow and you can paint the whole bus, make it sparkle." The next morning, Stella drew a picture for the rats to copy. There's a lot of little details in this that I don't know how much you can see. The book is in our library, and I will bring it down to social hour if you want to see what you're missing. Because it's really nice to see like what people are wearing and exactly what happens when they're on the bus together and stuff like that. People came with donations. Poppy brought her goldfish, Eric. Luke gave a set of super comics. Stella carried in her table soccer with the missing goalie. Mrs. Stavros brought a bus cake. And Lucy lent her dog, Bear, for anyone who needed to just sit and pat something. Right, so this is the photo that's really great to check out when you get the time. Everything that's happening there. They're looking at comics and playing checkers. Someone's looking at the goldfish. There's a baby. Life returned to the old bus. Stella's fingers fluttered and her soccer players spun. Babies crawled, people laughed, kids fought, granddad scratched dogs, meetings were planned, couples met, and the Fingles showed their vacation pictures. And every single person in that picture was asleep except the Fingles, by the way. One Saturday morning, just outside Stella's house, there was music and dancing, there were picnics and laughter when a tow truck arrived. "It's against regulations," said the driver. "This bus is causing an obstruction." "He means it sticks out," Stella's dad whispered. "The bus has to go." As the front wheels left the ground, snails dropped from under the bus and a twittering came from the old engine. And here is your line. So the guy has just said the bus has to go, and you'll say, "Go where? Go where?" Ah, so passionate. Gasped the crowd. "To the junkyard," came the reply. The crowd pleaded for their bus, but the junkyard boss came out to join the driver and shook his head. This one's for the crusher. A little pink glow crept across Stella's cheek. 3 rescued snails were deep in her pocket. "Excuse me," she said. "Shall we play table soccer? You can have the only goalie, but if I win, we'll keep the bus." Dun, dun, dun. "And why?" asked the junkyard boss. "Tell me, why should I play you for the bus?" "Because," replied Stella, "there are sparrows nesting in the engine." The game began. Handles spun, the ball smacked end to end, then goal! Stella scored. She followed that with 9 more and won. The boss put out his hand. "Joe," he said. "Stella," said Stella. They shook hands. Then Stella ran to the front of the bus. "Come and see," she said. "Chicks." Amid the frantic flapping of the parent sparrow's wings, Joe, the junkyard boss, spoke quietly. "Better get your bus to somewhere safe, kid, somewhere out of the way." "Thank you," said Stella, and the crowd cheered. "I know where we can take it," said Stella. While the others pushed, she and Mom sat up front to steer, almost back to where they'd started from. And when the old bus came to rest at last, everyone else needed a rest too. Well, almost everyone. That evening, in the vacant lot just behind Stella's house, music drifted high over the city, and the grass was danced flat around a bus called Heaven. And as a full moon rose, 3 snails slid safely back under the tires. And tomorrow, Stella will see the sparrow chicks fly for the first time. Yay! I know. So I want to leave you with this idea of what's possible. What's possible that you haven't even thought of? I want you to think of what you've never thought of as possible. It's an easy assignment, right? I mean, there wasn't a bus, and then there was a bus, and then there was really a bus, and then there wasn't a bus, and then there was really a bus. So I would just kind of keep your heart open to that this week, like the little possibilities of what's possible and suddenly magical and suddenly so super cool. And I don't know, just try to lean toward possibility this week. Maybe a little more than you might, whatever that means. So, where are the super cool kids? That's all of you guys. You think I'm talking about like some other group of kids that's like over there? You are the super cool kids. So come on up front, and we're going to be sung out to, what are we sung out to? Oh yeah, now let us sing. Yes. Okay, so rise in body or spirit. You really can choose if you rise or not. It's not like, don't be pressured by the person next to you looking at you. Okay.
So for those of you who are new to us, this is part of a long search to find different songs from the one we had continuously used when the children left, and we're experimenting with songs and seeing which ones catch the spirit of the congregation. Because Poppy was tired of the one we had, and I just want to trust Poppy's judgment that we can change and find something that will make everyone happier. So our offering this week also represents change, and it's Soul Fire Farm. Just a quick show of hands, how many people have heard of Soul Fire Farm? Well, Ashley and my wife and I had to make a little field trip down there just to check that it met the criteria that the donations team has for a going organization that we could support. It's a really unusual organization founded by Leah Penniman, a BIPOC person who was interested in food in general and the lack of food services in inner city Albany, where she and her husband originally lived. They bought a farm and they set it up in the countryside. It's just west of Petersburg, New York, for those of you who know where that is, east of Troy, near the Massachusetts border. And they made this farm into a place where they can grow food to distribute to people who don't have access to fresh food in Albany, where they can train people about new techniques that grow food that respect the land, and where they can start to create a relationship between that land and the Mohegan people who originally lived there. And so they, through other sources, reached out to Mohegan people who were living in Minnesota, found out what the seeds were that were grown in that area, and have started on the farm beginning to grow that kind of food also to honor the heritage of the farm. So the farm is a multi-purpose educational institution, an institution that grows food for people who need it, a place that trains BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color who want to become farmers on how they can do sustainable farming. And all of these pieces together sort of keep it afloat, and they built it up for nothing. So we went down to take a look at what the situation was. And Ashley's going to share her thoughts about that next Sunday. But what I saw there as we drove up, one of the first things I saw was a giant rack of boots. And that was for people who forgot to bring the right kind of boots to walk around on a farm and not bring city infections with them. And so this is hospitality. They had sent out flyer after flyer telling you what to wear, and still they had the boots there for the people who forgot. So the first thing you see is hospitality. Plus, we were gifted by having a dog that had just been there 2 weeks, who was learning to be the new farm dog. And this was an incredibly friendly Australian Shepherd, which of course was having a great time meeting new people running around everywhere. And so everybody started off on our tour in good spirits. Those of you who've been coming for a while know that over the last couple of years, we've been celebrating the indigenous agriculture concept of the Three Sisters, where corn, beans, and squash grow together in support. At this farm, they take this much further, looking at all other kinds of herbs and vegetables that can support each other and creating integrated systems. And they've started to work animals into it. Which kind of animals can move around the farm in different ways to support the growth of crops. And as we went through the tour, they showed us the different pieces of that, and where they've imported technology, like a variation on a greenhouse that allows you to extend your growing season, and where they've started to grow mushrooms by inoculating logs and stacking them in triangles on the wall. So as you went around this farm, you saw years of work, 20 years of work, of cumulative work in making things better by marrying modern food science to our knowledge of the past and different spiritual traditions of relationship to the land. And you're going to hear me talking about this marrying of science to spiritual traditions later. One other thing about the offering that we're starting today, because of the location of the piano, it makes it difficult to do what we've been doing of everybody coming forward. So we're going to go back to a variation on the past. Becky and one of the ushers are going to take these baskets and pass them down the rows. When it gets to the end of the row, you pass it back, and it's, oh great, it's Helene Vandenberg is going to be the other usher, and they'll collect them and work their way towards the back. And when they've finished, we will play the song for receiving the offering, and they'll bring it forward. So I invite you to be as generous as you're able in support of Soul Fire Farm. Receive the offering, and I invite you to stand to sing from You Are Received. So much. I see you have lost all of the vestigial memories of how to pass the basket. For over almost 3 years, because of COVID, when we met, we were not doing that. So that's a milestone that we went back to passing the basket. I have a few others. The first is a kind of a sad one, but with some happy tinges to it. Laura Surmely's mother died early yesterday morning at St. Joseph's Hospital in Buffalo. The family has not always been on the same page, but they all came together for this, despite Laura's misgivings, and the people who could be present were present, and the ones like Laura who couldn't be present found other ways to participate. Laura sang "Oh Holy Night," her mother's favorite Christmas carol, to her over the phone while she was still conscious, and her mother really responded to that. Laura said she also found comfort in the fact that St. Joseph's Hospital had the same name as her mother's husband and her youngest son. And her mother was 86, mother of 5 kids, a deeply devoted Roman Catholic, a nurse, partner to her husband in running a lodge and a meat market. And as I told Laura via email this morning, we can see her mother living on in Laura's dynamism, spirituality, compassion, and constant service to others. That was based on my reading of the obituary that Laura sent me. So our thoughts and prayers go to Laura, and the next time you're in touch with her, just be known that she just lost her mother. A much more happy and positive milestone, we had a wonderful worship team retreat yesterday out at a beautiful setting right on the shores of Lake Champlain, which is Esther's current home. And it marked the transition of Abby Sessions stepping down as our chairperson and Ellen Flight taking over. Now, we will work out an appropriate celebration of that, but Abby's been just an amazing chair for the worship team, leading us through my sabbatical, among other things, and summer programs. So the next time you see her, please thank her. And a fitting culmination to her service, we were going to have a catered vegan meal because Esther's a vegan. We wanted to accommodate everybody, and that fell through at the last minute. And Abby spent the whole day cooking the whole thing herself, which she insisted was an incredibly spiritual experience that she really treasured. And so that was, what a way to go out as the chair. It's not expected of you, by the way, if you step up to be the chair of some other team here at the congregation. And finally, we're trying something innovative. We've had a very large class of people who are interested in possibly becoming members of the congregation, and this is the first time we've really done this since the COVID crisis. And traditionally, we've all crammed it all into one ritual up here, and people come and they sign this membership book. And I was talking with Mike, and it didn't feel like the spirit of this time. So the whole month of November, what's going to happen is I will be down in Fellowship Hall with the membership book. And those members of the New You class who've decided that they want to become members now will have a chance to sign the membership book on any of the Sundays in November. It's sort of in the spirit of the Jewish High Holy Days, where the Book of Life stays open for 8 days. We'll leave the membership book open for the month for this group, and then in the beginning of December, we'll have a celebration for everybody who is signed during the month of November. So you'll see me over there, and if you see someone signing and you don't know them, take a break from your chat during coffee hour and go introduce yourself and welcome them to the membership at CVUUS. There's always unspoken joys and concerns. Oh, yes. Oh, Marnie took the trouble of filling out a yellow card and putting it in the offering basket, which I overlooked. Thank you, Marnie, for raising your hand. What a joy to see the front page article in this week's Addison Independent regarding preservation of 60 acres of land along Otter Creek to honor the dedicated teaching of our friend Steve Trombulak, who is consistently doing field work with his college students during his 34 years of teaching at Middlebury College. Steve was a wonderful member of CVUUS and served on the early worship committee for many years. His desire to consistently bring the deeply nourishing awareness of nature was a joyous aspect of our worship. And for those of you unfamiliar with our history, that's an understatement of what Steve did. I'm told that for 2 years, basically, he led every Sunday service, which is an incredible job on top of being a full-time college professor and taking all of these students in the field. So Marnie, thank you for calling that article and that gift to the college in Steve's name to our attention. For those of you who don't know, Steve has retired to living half of his year in the Berkshires and half in Puerto Rico at this point. We're still in touch, and he still loves CVUUS. For all the unspoken joys and concerns, as I started to say, let's have a moment of reflection so you can get in touch with where you are this morning as we head into the last part of our worship.
I need the box.
Hmm.
Our first reading today is by Dr. Atul Gawande. Complications, a surgeon's notes on an imperfect science. We look for medicine to be an orderly field of knowledge and procedure, but it is not. It is an imperfect science, an enterprise of constantly changing knowledge, uncertain information, fallible individuals, and at the same time, lives on the line. There is science in what we do, yes, but also habit, intuition, and sometimes just plain old guessing. The gap between what we know and what we aim for persists. And a second reading by Dr. Rachel N. Remen from Kitchen Table Wisdom. The denial of death is the most common way we all edit life. Despite the power of technology to reveal to us the nature of this world, death remains the ultimate unknown, impervious to the prodding finger of science. We might well ask if anything which cannot be addressed in scientific terms is really worthy of our attention. Yet, most of the things that give life its depth, meaning, and value are impervious to science.
Thank you, Becky. So I need to start today by talking just a bit about my despair at what's coming towards us on the national and the international level. That's not to say you can't find good news or potentially hopeful news here and there. Bolsonaro was defeated in Brazil. What that will mean, it remains to be seen. One of the largest manufacturing plants for windmills is being built off in Poland so that you can extend green energy from the Danish company Westeros into an former Eastern Bloc nation. There's a large coral reef in the mid-Pacific that unaccountably has come back after seeming to be on its way to death. And so these things are there, and at least the headlines are there. If you look closely, they almost always are more complicated than that. But in general, news coverage skewers these days towards disaster and tragedy. And it's not just because that sells newspapers and draws viewers. A lot of it is self-inflicted wounds, allowing fear and misinformation to cloud our understanding of reality and our judgment about what we have to do each day. And I think on balance, things are getting worse. That, for me, makes it very hard to sing some of the more hopeful hymns in our Unitarian hymnal, things that I grew up with and first led me to fall in love with being in community with the congregation. We had our retreat yesterday, and we had a drawing exercise about the first spiritual moment we had, and I ended up drawing something that represented our children's worship in the church I grew up in San Mateo, and the stick of the match is really big because I learned how to light a candle there for a chalice, but there's also all this music in it because I first really learned For the Beauty of the Earth there, and a bunch of other wonderful hymns, most of them incredibly hopeful. Wonders still the world shall witness is an oldie but goodie in our hymnal, but it's really hard to sing. Wonders still the world shall witness, never known in days of old, never dreamed by ancient sages, howsoever free and bold. Sons and daughters shall inherit wondrous arts to us unknown, when the dawn of peace its splendor over all the world is thrown. And it just gets more hopeful after that in the next two verses. And now it seems a little bit like a dream and hard to stick with. And for me, it's hard to believe that we won't have more to grieve come Tuesday with the elections. It's just where I stand. So I feel we owe it to ourselves to focus on where we can be pretty sure we will be able to find some hope and joy when the dust settles this week after the election and in the weeks to come. The young African-American poet Amanda Gorman put it better in Every Day We Are Learning, which is part of her recently published poetry collection, Call Us What We Carry. She wrote, "Every day we are learning how to live with essence, not ease, how to move with haste, not hate, how to leave this pain that is beyond us behind us. Just like any skill or art, we cannot possess hope without practicing it. It is the most fundamental craft we demand of ourselves." It's most fundamental craft we demand of ourselves. Now, she's speaking out of the experience of African Americans in this country. She's speaking out of the embodiment of hope in a formerly enslaved people. But I believe she's speaking for something that's true for all of us. So for me, I'm going to look at where we look to get more in touch with hope in a time like this. And I'm going to look very close to home. I'm going to look in and around Porter Hospital, the imperfect but exceptional small hospital serving Addison County. And a little background for those of you who haven't been attending regularly, I spoke a few weeks ago about the intersection of science and religion and why, when it's done right, that's the best thing for both of them. And as you can see in our readings, I'm playing off of that again. I do think we are getting better about the intersection of science and reading. It's a generalization, to be sure, but to me, it's like a breath of fresh air in a poisoned atmosphere that we are learning how to do this better. And I get in a room like this and I just say, let's just take a deep breath. We're getting better at one of the most fundamental things, this historically very difficult intersection of science and religion. But it's such a big topic. So I'm going to focus even locally on the two biggest transitions of our existence where medicine comes into play, birth and death. Now, you aren't all scientists studying birth and death, but you are all experts in your own experience, and all of you have relevant experience. So I'm going to share some birth and death conversations I had this week. And I don't think what you're going to hear will surprise you, but I pray it will make you feel better about the world we find ourselves living in today. And I'm going to start with Dr. Jack Mayer. How many people in this room know Jack? Just quick raise your, yes. Very well integrated into our community. He started his Vermont medical career in 1976 in Innisburg Falls, and he spent most of it in Middlebury. I asked him about any memorable moments early in his career that reflected the relative importance at the time of science versus religious values. And Jack told me this: the perspective was heavily scientific at the time, and medicine felt like it was on the verge of conquering illness and disease. He recalled then the first time that he was at a stillbirth. I made what felt like a really radical move. I handed the dead baby to the parents to hold for as long as they wanted. So what made that radical? I asked him. He said, they taught me absolutely nothing in medical school in the 70s about two subjects, death and grief. And nutrition, excuse me, grief and nutrition. We weren't prepared for the larger world of healing our patients. A stillbirth then was typically the end of a doctor's involvement with the child's life. I'm sorry if the doctor leaves the room. But Jack went on to say, I had been primed to give them the child and stay with them by things I had been reading. Things like the work of Dr. Rachel Naomi Raymond, the author of our second reading. it turned out that Jack had been fortunate enough to study with Dr. Riemann during his residency in San Francisco before he moved to Vermont. And as you heard, she was teaching a shockingly countercultural perspective at that time for young doctors. Most of the things that give life its depth, meaning, and value are impervious to science. Good doctors recognize the reality of the impact of such things on health outcomes, and they seek to work with rather than to disparage those outcomes as non-scientific. So recently, Dr. Mayer said he's been struck with how much this widened perspective for what determines health is showing up on research about harmless placebo effects. So placebo is something that seems to improve the health outcome for no apparent reason when you do a scientific test. And it's usually viewed as a failure of the drug you're testing if the placebo produces a positive effect pretty much like the drug does. And it's kind of radical to see the placebo not as the failure of a drug, but as something else kicking in, which is helping to deal with the symptoms of the disease. It doesn't cure the disease, but it can have a major effect on health and welfare. And so what Dr. Mayer is responding to is this new move in science towards respecting something that isn't arrived at by scientific means and figuring out how you incorporate it into humane treatment. And then he went on to say to me, I asked him about Porter, and he said, well, Porter is the best hospital I've worked in by a long shot. All of the ancillary personnel are so warm and helpful. And we chatted about why that might be. He said, well, I think it's partly because we know each other. It's the value of community. We have ties beyond the medical situations. We shop in the same stores. Our kids go to the same schools. We're there being supportive of each other beyond just the basic job description. So we left that conversation there knowing there was a lot more to say about the value of community. Another doctor you might run into around town is Dr. Diana Bernard. How many of you know her? Yes, even more than Jack. Dr. Bernard, along with CVUUS congregant Dr. Will Porter, established an innovative palliative care program at Porter Hospital in 2009. She became a leading advocate for and expert on medical assistance for gravely ill patients who want to control the circumstances in which their life ends, which has been a right for Vermonters since it was approved by the legislature in 2013. And it wasn't just Diana who worked on it. Marnie Wood worked on it very actively as a lay advocate. And Joan Klein, a member of the congregation when I arrived, was one of the first people to take advantage of it in 2015. And he invited me to be with her when she took advantage of it and then to share her experience with the congregation. Diana told me, we've made a tremendous amount of scientific progress in my medical career in many realms. There's technology that helps people recover from strokes, from heart attacks, helps people live with cancer in ways that were unimaginable then. Even seat belts have saved millions of lives that have steadily gotten better. But science gets drunk with success, she says, and it's lost contact with what's meaningful to many people. Doctors routinely forget to remind people they are mortal, she said, and science often regards death as a failure. But there are opportunities in recognizing that your life is winding down when it is. You need assistance to embrace those opportunities. So medical aid in dying is a place where we are getting it right in ways that weren't imaginable 20 years ago. And even the wind is weighing in, saying huzzah. So medical aid in dying is a relatively new tool as a formalized practice. There were always doctors who tried to do that. But it's recognized that when we prolong life, we've often prolonged suffering, is Diana's point. And so giving people more agency and control, she said, well, that helps people with what they really want. And so, for instance, most people say they want to be home when they die, surrounded by loved ones. Yet only a third of Vermonters achieve that. And that's despite Vermont making huge advances in hospice care. So why is that? Dr. Bernard told me, well, many patients still don't know their rights, or they interpret hospice as giving up. But it's not about giving up. It's about the best plan once you understand their situation and their wishes. And too many doctors are reluctant to be honest with patients, which makes it difficult to really come up with the best plan. She mentioned that UVM, which Porter is now a part of, the University of Vermont, has a conversation lab to study what is effective and what skills are necessary to communicate hard news and to address the patient's values. So is Porter exceptional in this regard? She said, well, having a palliative care team at a critical access hospital like this isn't the norm in the United States. So in that sense, Porter is exceptional. There's some details that explain why that happens that have to do with funding I'm not going to go into. But she said it's very important for us to understand that palliative care is not the same as hospice, nor is it simply state-of-the-art patient pain control and comfort for people who are dying as hospital patients. She defines it as an extra layer of support for people navigating serious illness regardless of their goals. So a congregant who's familiar with this is Cass Singh, who gave me permission to share some details about her husband's Ian's death in December. Ian's cancer was very late stage, but it looked like he was weeks or even months of life left when the decision was made to sign up for hospice and bring hospice into their home. Hospice services can actually only be reimbursed in the home in most situations. But unlike most Vermonters who want to die in their homes, Ian and Cass were in agreement that unlike those people, they did not want him to die in their home in Brandon. Cass said, the girls and I wouldn't be able to bear continuing living there if that happened. We couldn't deal with the sadness. So when Ian suffered a major stroke, their family doctor, Jess Rouse, another CVUUS member, worked to rescind the hospice decision quickly and get Ian back into the hospital, where, working with Dr. Bernard, he was placed in the short-term hospice suite that had only recently been opened within the hospital. Diana Bernard was super sensitive to what Ian wanted and to walking us through the options, Cass said. I couldn't have gotten that kind of treatment in Nebraska, she said, referring to her former home. So this is not really a talk about how to handle death or disastrous births. This is a talk about having something powerfully positive to live for despite the dismal headlines around us, something that's right in front of our noses, looking at Porter Hospital and many other local institutions that aren't in medicine doing things right. The philosopher Alistair MacIntyre, quite profoundly, I think, once said, the answer to what am I to do always starts with answering the question, what story am I a part of? All of us, I believe, are fortunate to be a part of a story here in a community that works. Not perfectly, for sure, not equally for everybody, for sure, but on balance, medicine here in Addison County is working better than it used to at bending the arc of the universe toward justice, compassion, and beauty. And that's just one sign that when we wake up Wednesday morning, whatever the election results, we will be living midst abundant opportunities to do the right thing, nurture hope, and bring joy and comfort to each other. We can be supportive of the hospital in every step it continues down that path. And we can be supportive in so many other ways to all the other things that are going on positively in this community. So what are we here to do today? To celebrate that we are part of a local story grounded in love that's begging for us to play our parts. May we all practice that most fundamental craft to which we are called, cultivating hope. And may we gather here regularly to remind ourselves to do so with faith, faith in the power that we can embody beloved community grounded in the spirit of life-giving love and love-giving life. So read national if you want, but think local in times like these, and you'll have the best access to hope and agency. Blessed be, and amen. So our closing song continues in the spirit, For All That Is Our Life. It's 128 in the hymnal. And the lyrics are up here for those who don't want to read the music. These are tough times in many ways, but we have within the community the resources to help us all be better, do better, find joy, and carry on, and be a beacon of hope for those around us. Blessed be.